The canvas flap of the transport truck whipped violently against the metal frame as the convoy rumbled over the cratered roads outside of Da Nang. Inside, the air was thick, smelling of diesel fumes, red dust, and the unwashed fear of 20 prisoners huddled together. Mai sat near the back, her arms wrapped tightly around her swollen belly, trying to cushion her unborn child from every jarring bump. She was 22 years old, a radio operator from a village north of the DMZ, and she was terrified. For months, the cadres in the jungle had drilled one specific fear into her mind. The Americans were not just soldiers. They were described as white devils who lacked human souls. The propaganda had been absolute and terrifyingly specific. She had been told that American doctors performed unspeakable experiments on captives, especially women. But the worst rumor, the one that made Mai's breath catch in her throat every time the baby kicked, was about the children. "They will not let you keep it," the elder women in her unit had whispered when her pregnancy first began to show beneath her black pajamas. "If you are captured, they will cut the baby out. They take the infants to America to raise them as servants or worse." Mai closed her eyes, trying to block out the roar of the engine and the sobbing of a younger girl across from her. She had been captured 3 days ago during a chaotic raid near the border. Her husband, Hui, was gone, lost in the smoke and confusion of the airstrike. Now she was alone, 5 months pregnant, and heading into the belly of the beast. She pressed her hands against her stomach, feeling a faint flutter of movement. "I will not let them take you," she vowed silently to the life inside her. "I will bite, I will scratch, I will die before I let a single American hand touch you." The truck began to slow. Through the gap in the canvas, the dense green of the jungle gave way to an alien landscape of barbed wire, watchtowers, and endless rows of olive-drab tents. The noise changed from the natural sounds of the forest to the mechanical scream of helicopters and the shouting of foreign voices. They were passing through the gates of a U.S. holding facility. To Mai, it didn't look like a prison. With its high fences and searchlights cutting through the dusk, it looked like a slaughterhouse. And she was the cattle. The prisoners were herded off the truck, stumbling on legs numb from the cramped journey. The heat of the lowlands was suffocating, a wet blanket that smelled of aviation fuel and burning trash. Mai kept her head down, clutching her belly, trying to make herself small. Around her, the camp was a city of canvas and wire, buzzing with activity. Jeeps tore past, kicking up red dust, and soldiers, so many soldiers, moved with a casual confidence that terrified her. They were giants, well-fed and loud, their uniforms intact, their boots heavy. It was a stark contrast to the ragged, starving existence she had known in the tunnels. They were directed towards a large, corrugated metal shed. Inside, the noise of the airfield was muffled, replaced by the clacking of typewriters and the hum of electric fans, a luxury Mai had never seen. "Move! Move!" a South Vietnamese interpreter barked, pushing the women into a line. Mai's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was the processing center. This was where they would separate the useful from the useless, the pregnant from the mothers. She watched the women ahead of her. Fingerprints, photos, questions shouted in a language that sounded like barking dogs. When it was Mai's turn, she stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held her identification tag. Behind the desk sat an American soldier. He looked impossibly young, his face dusted with freckles, his eyes tired but not cruel. He didn't look like the monsters from the political lectures. He looked like a boy. "Name?" he asked, not looking up from his clipboard. "Nguyen Thi Mai," she whispered. He wrote it down, then looked up. His eyes dropped immediately to the swell of her stomach. Mai froze. The blood drained from her face. Here it comes, she thought. The selection. "Baby?" he asked, pointing with his pen. It was a clumsy gesture, but the word was clear. Mai nodded, unable to speak, bracing herself for the order to be taken away to the medical wing the rumor spoke of. "When?" the soldier asked. He mimed a rocking motion. "When is baby comin'?" Mai swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust.
She knew a little English from her school days in Hue before the war consumed everything. 3 months? Maybe 4? The soldier paused. Mai squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the guard to grab her arm, but no hand came. Instead, she heard a soft chuckle. She opened her eyes. The American boy was smiling. It wasn't a leer. It was a genuine, goofy grin. "Congratulations, Mama San. We get you to the dock, okay? Check on the little one."
"Medical care," the soldier had said. The words echoed in Mai's mind as she was led away from the processing desk. But fear, cultivated by years of war and indoctrination, did not vanish with a single smile. She was marched toward a block of wooden structures designated for female prisoners. The air here smelled of disinfectant, a sharp, chemical, stinging scent that made her nose twitch and her stomach turn. "Wash," the guard gestured to a communal bathing area screened off by heavy canvas. Mai froze at the entrance. In the damp tunnels of the north, the political officers had spoken of American chemicals that stripped the leaves from trees and burned skin to the bone. Was this how they did it? Was this the cleaning where they would be sprayed with toxins under the guise of hygiene? She looked at the other women. Some were trembling. Others stood with the resigned blankness of the dead. But one woman stepped forward, turned a brass handle, and gasped. It wasn't gas. It wasn't poison. It was water. Warm water. Mai stepped under the stream, her body rigid, waiting for the burn. Instead, the warmth soaked into her aching muscles, loosening the knots of tension in her back. There was soap, a rectangular pink bar that smelled artificially floral but lathered into a rich white foam. For the first time in months, Mai washed the red clay of the jungle from her skin. She scrubbed her hair, watching the brown, muddy water swirl into the drain, taking with it the grime of the tunnels and the dust of the road. When they emerged, wet and shivering in the cooling evening air, they were not given their dirty black pajamas back. They were issued simple, gray cotton shifts. They were loose, impersonal, but impossibly clean. Then came the mess hall. If the shower had been a shock, the food was an assault on her senses. The prisoners were handed metal trays. Mai stared down at hers in disbelief. A mound of steamed white rice, a ladle of beef stew with visible chunks of meat, and a small metal cup containing yellow peaches in syrup. "Eat," a guard said, pointing to a bench. Mai stared at the meat. It was more protein than she had seen in 6 months of rationing in the bush. She took a tentative bite. It was salty, rich, and heavy. "Don't get used to it," a voice hissed beside her. It was Lon, an older woman from her unit, her face hard and angular, her eyes scanning the room with suspicion. "They fattened the pig before they slit its throat. It's a psychological trick. They want us weak with gratitude so we spill our secrets." Mai didn't answer. She spooned a slice of peach into her mouth. The sweetness exploded on her tongue, sharp and cloying, bringing sudden hot tears to her eyes. It tasted like a lie, but her starving body didn't care. Trick or not, the baby needed to eat. 2 days later, Mai was summoned to the infirmary. The walk across the compound felt like a march to the gallows. Land's warnings hissed in her ears. They are doctors of death. They want to see how much pain a Vietnamese woman can endure. The infirmary was a long, low building with screened windows. Inside, it was aggressively clean, the air sharp with the scent of rubbing alcohol, a smell Mai associated with the stinging pain of wounds not healing. She was directed to a cot, separated by a white curtain. An older American man in a white coat entered, followed by the interpreter. The doctor had graying hair and thick glasses that magnified his eyes. He washed his hands at a basin, his back to her. The sound of running water and the scrubbing of skin sounded menacing in the silence. When he turned, holding a metal instrument with rubber tubing, Mai flinched, pulling her knees to her chest. "Tell her it's just a stethoscope," the doctor said softly to the interpreter. "I want to listen to the baby." The interpreter translated. Mai hesitated. Her eyes darted to the door, gauging the distance, but the guards were outside,
She had no choice. Slowly, she lowered her legs and allowed the doctor to press the cold metal disc against her exposed stomach. She held her breath, waiting for the pain. Thump, 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 thump. The sound filled the small space, rhythmic and fast like a galloping horse. It was the amplified sound of her child's heart. The doctor smiled behind his glasses. "Strong," he said. "Very strong." He removed the stethoscope and began writing on a chart. "Tell her she is healthy. We will start her on prenatal vitamins today, calcium and iron." Mai blinked, trying to process the translation. "Vitamins? Iron? Ask him," she whispered to the interpreter, her voice trembling. "Ask him when they will take it." The interpreter frowned and relayed the question. The doctor stopped writing. He looked at Mai over the rim of his glasses, confused. "Take what?" "The baby," Mai said, her voice rising in panic. "When it is born, the cadres said Americans take the babies." The doctor's expression softened into something profound, a mix of pity and frustration. He shook his head firmly. "No, we don't take babies, Mai. In fact," he tapped the clipboard, "when the child is born, we issue an official birth certificate. It's a military record. It guarantees the child's identity and rights under international law. The baby stays with you, always."
The routine of the camp settled into a strange, rhythmic peace that Mai found harder to navigate than the chaos of war. Morning roll call, breakfast, powdered eggs and bread, an unthinkable luxury in the north, light work duty, and then the long, humid afternoons. Because of her condition, she was assigned to the mending shed, sewing buttons and patching gray prisoner uniforms. It was quiet work. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was a storm of confusion. The doctor's promise of a birth certificate had planted a seed of doubt that no amount of Lon's angry whispering could uproot. Why would they document a child they intended to kill? It didn't make sense. The logic of the propaganda was fracturing under the weight of daily realities. The vitamins on her nightstand, the extra milk at dinner, the absence of torture. One sweltering Tuesday, the absurdity of her situation peaked. The camp commander announced that prisoners were entitled to small wages for their labor, paid in camp script, usable at a small commissary set up near the gate. It was part of the Geneva Convention, the interpreter explained. Lon spat on the red dirt when she heard it. "Bribes," she hissed, her face gaunt and hard. "They buy our loyalty with trinkets. Do not touch their blood money." But Mai went. Driven by a craving she couldn't control, she walked into the small wooden hut and felt the air leave her lungs. It wasn't just supplies. It was a treasure trove. There were bars of soap wrapped in colorful paper, tubes of toothpaste, magazines with glossy photos, and in a metal cooler filled with ice, bottles of Coca-Cola. She clutched her paper script, feeling guilty, feeling like a traitor, but her body screamed for sugar. She bought a cold bottle and a small bar of chocolate. The glass was sweating in the heat. Outside, under the shade of a corrugated overhang, she pressed the cold bottle against her burning cheek, closing her eyes. She took a sip. The bubbles burned pleasantly, the sweetness rushing through her blood like a drug. It was shameful. Her husband was likely dead or starving in a tunnel filled with rats. Her village was likely a crater, and here she was, the enemy's prisoner, drinking cold soda and feeling the baby kick. "You enjoy the enemy's honey, Mai," she said, appearing beside her like a shadow. Her eyes were hollow, fixed on the bottle with a mix of disgust and envy. "But remember, Mai, honey catches flies. When the war is over, you will have to explain to the party why you grew fat while we starved." Mai looked at the bottle, then at her belly, which seemed to have grown larger just in the last week. She thought of the iron pills the doctor gave her every morning. "The party is not here," Mai said quietly, shocking herself with the defiance in her voice. "And the party did not give me vitamins. They told me my baby would be stolen. The Americans gave me this." She took another sip, the sweetness mixing with the bitter taste of betrayal. The letters arrived in September, carried by the International Red Cross in a slow, convoluted journey through neutral channels in Paris and Bangkok before reaching the camp. It was a rare event, a crack in the wall of silence that separated the prisoners from the war they had left behind. When the guard called out, "Wen Ti Mai," she nearly tripped over her own feet, scrambling to the front. The envelope was stained with damp and dirt, the paper thin and fragile. It was from her younger sister, Lian. Mai sat on the edge of her bunk, her hands trembling so violently she could barely tear the seal. The news was a litany of sorrow. Their village north of the DMZ was gone, flattened by a B-52 strike during Rolling Thunder. Her mother and Lian were living in an underground bunker near the Laotian border. Food was scarce, mostly cassava roots and jungle leaves. "We are hungry all the time," Lian wrote in tight, cramped characters. "But we are alive. We have heard nothing of Hui. We pray for you." Mai lowered the letter, feeling a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. She looked around the barracks. The electric fan hummed in the corner. Her stomach was full from a lunch of rice and canned mackerel. She was safe. She was clean. And her family was eating roots in a hole in the ground while bombs shook the earth above them. She felt a sudden, irrational urge to tear the birth certificate promise from her mind, to reject the vitamins, to starve herself in solidarity. How can I be here, safe with the enemy, while they suffer? The guilt was a physical weight, heavier than the child she carried. That evening, she borrowed a pencil and a sheet of paper from the supply officer. She needed to write back, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she tell her starving mother that she was gaining weight? How could she explain that the monsters were giving her prenatal checkups? She wrote carefully, knowing the censors would read every word. "Dearest sister, do not worry about me. I am being treated according to international regulations. I have food, I have medicine. The baby will be born soon." She stopped. She wanted to write about the ice-cold Coca-Cola, the peaches, the young soldier who smiled, but she couldn't. It would sound like madness to them, or worse, like betrayal. So she simply wrote, "I am safe. Survive. Please survive until I come home." October brought the monsoon rains. They hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the laundry shed, a relentless, deafening drum roll that turned the red dust of the camp into slick mud. Mai was heavy now, her movements slow and deliberate. The simple act of folding towels left her breathless. She was 7 months along, and the fear of the medical experiments had largely faded, replaced by a strange, suspended state of waiting. One afternoon, while the rain poured in gray sheets outside the open bay doors, Mai found herself working near 2 American MPs. They were leaning against the doorframe, smoking cigarettes, trying to stay dry. Mai kept her head down, folding a stack of white sheets, rendering herself invisible, as she had learned to do. "I got the letter yesterday," the taller soldier said, blowing a stream of smoke into the rain. "Linda had the baby, a girl, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Mai's hands paused mid-fold. She understood baby and girl. "No kidding," the other soldier replied, shifting his rifle. "That's great, man. What'd she name her?" "Sarah, after my grandma," the tall soldier chuckled, a sound devoid of malice. He pulled a small, crinkled photo from his pocket and showed it to his friend. Then he turned his head and looked directly at Mai. Mai flinched, expecting a shout or an order, but the soldier's eyes were soft. He nodded towards her stomach. "Hey, Mama-san, you're close, huh? Next month?" Mai didn't answer, but she didn't look away. "Rough deal," he muttered to his friend, looking back at the rain. "Having a kid in a place like this, caught in the middle of this mess. My sister back in Ohio, she's complaining about the hospital food. And this woman? She's got nothing. War is hell, buddy. Nobody wins. Everybody just loses something different." Mai stood frozen, the clean sheet clutched to her chest. They weren't talking about her as a target, or a communist, or a prisoner. They were comparing her to their sisters, their wives. They pitied her. The realization hit her harder than a blow. They do not hate me. The propaganda had painted them as soulless killing machines. But machines do not carry photos of their newborn daughters. Machines do not feel pity for their enemies. Standing there in the damp laundry shed, the wall of hatred Mai had built to protect herself began to crumble, leaving her exposed and terrified in a completely new way. If they were human, then what was this war? By late November,
Mai felt like she was carrying a stone statue in her belly. The humidity of the monsoon season made her skin feel perpetually sticky, and her ankles had swollen to the size of grapefruits. The camp doctor now saw her every 3 days. The routine was efficient, almost military in its precision, yet the touch was always gentle. "You are very close, Mai," the doctor told her one rainy Tuesday, wiping his glasses on his white coat. "The head is down. Everything looks perfect." He signaled to the interpreter to translate the next part carefully. "Listen to me. When the pains start, the real pains that don't stop, you tell the guard immediately. Do not wait. We have an ambulance on standby at the main gate. It will take you to the field hospital at the airbase. It is only 20 minutes away." Mai nodded, her hands resting protectively on the mound of her stomach. "Hospital," she repeated in English. "Yes. A proper hospital. Clean beds, surgical equipment if needed. You will deliver there. Stay for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then return here." The room went silent. The hum of the electric fan seemed to grow louder. This was the moment. The gap between the hospital and the return to the camp. This was the shadow where the nightmares lived. Mai's heart began to race, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She had to know. Even if the answer killed her, she had to know. "Doctor," she said, her voice small and trembling. She looked at the interpreter, her eyes pleading. "Ask him, please." "Ask him what?" the interpreter grunted. "After—" Mai swallowed the lump in her throat. "After the baby is born, will I bring the baby back?" The interpreter translated. The doctor stopped organizing his instruments. He turned slowly, his face softening into that same look of pity she had seen on the soldier in the rain. "Of course," he said, stepping closer. "Why wouldn't you?" "Because I am enemy," Mai whispered, the English words feeling clumsy and dangerous. "Because rumors say Americans take babies," the doctor sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Mai, look at me. We are not going to take your baby. That child is yours. When you come back from the hospital, we have a special section in the barracks prepped for nursing mothers. You will keep her. You will raise her. We are just here to make sure she arrives safely." Mai slumped back against the exam table, the tension leaving her body so suddenly she felt dizzy. It wasn't a trick. The monsters weren't monsters. They were just men following rules she didn't understand.
The pain arrived, not as a wave, but as a grenade detonating in her lower back. It was 2 a.m. on a breathless December night. Mai gasped, gripping the metal frame of her cot, her knuckles turning white. She waited, counting the seconds in the dark. 10 minutes later, the grenade exploded again, harder this time. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, the floor cool against her bare feet. "Guard!" she called out, stumbling towards the wire mesh door. "Bibi! Bibi coming!" The MP on duty, a large man who usually spent his shifts reading comic books, dropped his magazine. He looked at her, eyes wide with a panic that seemed comical on such a heavily armed man. He snatched up the field telephone. "Command! This is Post 4. We got a situation. The prisoner. Yeah, the pregnant one. She's popping. Send the meat wagon. Now!" The ambulance ride was a blur of noise and motion. The vehicle rattled over the uneven roads, the siren wailing, a sound Mai had always associated with airstrikes and death. Now it was screaming for her life. Inside, a medic held her hand. He didn't speak Vietnamese, but he kept murmuring, "Easy now, easy," wiping the sweat from her forehead with a rough towel. The field hospital was a shock of fluorescent light and cool air. She was wheeled past wounded soldiers, some on stretchers, some in wheelchairs. They stopped talking as she passed, staring at the pregnant enemy in their midst. Mai didn't care. The world had narrowed down to the rhythm of her own body. The labor room was stark, smelling of iodine. The doctor, the same one with the thick glasses, was there, looking calm amidst the chaos. "Okay, Mai," he said, his voice cutting through the haze of pain. "You are doing great. When I say push, you push." The labor was long and brutal. For 6 hours, Mai fought. She fought the pain, she fought the fear, she fought the memory of the jungle. And then, just as the sun began to bleed through the blinds, she felt a sudden release. A cry filled the room, high, sharp, and furious. "It's a girl!" the doctor announced, his voice thick with relief. a healthy, loud baby girl. They cleaned the infant and wrapped her in a white blanket stamped with U.S. Army. When they placed her in Mai's arms, the baby stopped crying instantly. Mai looked down at the tiny, red face, the tuft of black hair, the fierce dark eyes blinking against the light. An, Mai whispered, tracing the curve of the baby's cheek. Your name is An, peace.
For 3 days, Mai lived in a suspended reality. The hospital was a bubble of air-conditioned silence, broken only by the cries of infants and the squeak of rubber-soled shoes. She was fed chicken broth, warm bread, and cubes of strange, wobbly fruit gelatin. She nursed on, learning the rhythm of her daughter's breath, marveling at the tiny fingers that curled around her own. On the morning of her discharge, the doctor entered her room carrying a thick manila envelope. He sat on the edge of the bed, his expression serious. "You are going back to the camp today," he said, the interpreter echoing his words. "You and An are healthy, but before you go, I have this for you." He opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper. It was embossed with a seal, an eagle with spread wings. "This," the doctor said, handing it to her with both hands, "is An's birth certificate. It is an official Department of Defense document." Mai took the paper. Her hands, calloused from digging trenches and loading rifles, felt rough against the smooth stationery. She couldn't read all the words, but she recognized the important ones. Name, Nguyen T. An. Date of birth, December 12, 1968. Place of birth, 95th Evacuation Hospital, Da Nang Air Base. Mother, Nguyen T. Mai. It proves she was born here, the doctor explained. It proves she exists in the eyes of the law. No matter what happens in this war, Mai, no matter who wins or loses, this paper says she has rights. Keep it safe. Hide it. Mai looked up at him. "Why?" she asked in English. "Why you give this?" The doctor paused, looking out the window at the medevac helicopters landing in the distance. "Because she is a child," he said simply, "and children don't have enemies." The ride back to the camp was different. Mai held on tight against her chest, the envelope tucked inside her shirt, pressing against her skin like a shield. When she entered the barracks, she was led to the partitioned section for mothers. It was quieter there. 4 other women were nursing babies, their faces tired but soft. That night, while An slept in a basket made of woven reeds, Mai pulled out the certificate by the light of a kerosene lamp. She ran her thumb over the seal. The cadre had told her the Americans would steal her future. Instead, they had given her daughter a name and a place in the world. It was a piece of paper, fragile and combustible, yet to Mai it felt like armor. It was proof that in the midst of a war designed to erase people, her daughter had been written down in permanent ink. Time moved differently in the camp. While the war escalated outside, rumors of the Tet Offensive raging in the cities, the skies burning with napalm, Mai's world was small, quiet, and centered on An. The baby grew plump on American formula and the extra rations Mai saved. Her first smile happened on a Tuesday in February, her first laugh a month later. By the time An was 6 months old, the news came. A guard posted a list on the barracks door. "Prisoner exchange," the interpreter announced. "DMZ crossing. Next week." Mai found her name on the list. It should have been a moment of pure joy. She was going home. She would see her mother, her sister. She would walk on the soil of her ancestors again. But as she packed her few belongings, the gray dresses, a few tins of condensed milk she had hoarded, and the precious envelope, she felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. She looked at the camp, the place where she had been fed, where her daughter had been born safely, where the enemy had treated her with more care than she had ever expected. And then she thought of the letters from Lien, the hunger, the bunkers, the fear. "You were lucky," Lon whispered, watching her pack. "You go back to the fight. I go back to the ruins," Mai corrected softly. She realized then that she was leaving the safest place she had known in years to return to a hellscape. It was a bitter paradox. She was taking a healthy, happy baby from a prison camp into a free world of starvation. That night, she wrote one final letter. Not to send, but to keep. She wrote down everything: the ice cream, the doctor, the certificate. She needed to remember the truth.
When the world tried to force her back into the black and white simplicity of hatred, she was returning to the North, but she was no longer just a comrade. She was a mother who knew that humanity could survive even in the house of the enemy.
The exchange took place on the banks of the Ben Hai River, the scar that divided the country in two. Mai walked across the Hien Luong Bridge, carrying On in a sling against her chest. She looked like a ghost returning from the underworld. But the baby in her arms was round-cheeked and healthy, a miracle amidst the skeletal figures waiting on the northern bank. The reunion was not the joyous celebration Mai had imagined. It was desperate. Her mother wept, touching An's face with trembling, dirt-stained fingers, as if testing to see if the child was real. They returned to a landscape of bomb craters and ash. The years that followed were defined by hunger and the slow, agonizing work of rebuilding the life from rubble. But through the famine, through the re-education sessions, through the sheer exhaustion of survival, Mai kept one thing hidden beneath the floorboards of their rebuilt shack: the waterproof pouch containing the birth certificate. An grew up hearing two histories. One was the official history taught in school, the story of imperialist invaders, of heroic resistance, of a black and white war between good and evil. The other was the story her mother told her in the quiet of the night, a story about a prison camp where the devils served ice cream, where a young soldier missed his sister, and where a doctor with thick glasses treated an enemy prisoner with the same care he would give his own wife. Decades later, when the hair at Mai's temples had turned white, and the war was a distant, fading nightmare, she sat her daughter down. An was a teacher now, a woman of 30 with children of her own. Mai opened an old wooden box and pulled out the yellowed, brittled sheet of paper. The eagle seal was faded, but the typed letters remained clear. "Read it," Mai said softly. An read the English words, her finger tracing the line. "Place of birth, 95th Evacuation Hospital." "I don't understand," An said, looking up. "Why did you keep this?" "It is an American paper." "I kept it because it is the truth," Mai replied, placing her hand over her daughter's. "The world will tell you that war is simple, that we were right and they were monsters, and in many ways they were. But this paper proves that even when the world is burning, individual people can still choose to be human. You were born in the house of the enemy, my daughter, and the enemy gave you a name and sent you home safely. Never forget that kindness can be found in the strangest of places." Mai Nguyen closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of her grandchildren playing outside. The war was over. The hatred had faded. But the paper remained, a silent testament to the complex, messy, and beautiful endurance of mercy.